Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The other day, I talked about which free agents I think are the most overrated going into 2020 free agency. Today, I will be talking about which players I think are the complete opposite. Who are the most underrated, the most undervalued free agents heading into free agency this year. But before I start talking about those players, I just want to leave a reminder to leave a like and subscribe. I appreciate all the support I've been getting lately, and I hope that continues. Without any further ado, let's talk about which 7 players I think are the most underrated free agents heading into this year's free agency class. And in this video, obviously, I'm not going to talk about Anthony Davis, not going to talk about Brandon Ingram, because people value them where they should. They value those guys at a max contract. Today, I'm going to talk about players that I think people are valuing at a number that's lower than what they actually should be getting. And that starts with Shabazz Napier. For me, he is, well, if I think about it, probably like the second best point guard on the market this year. It's a pretty empty class for point guards outside of Fred VanVleet. There's not too many big prizes. Oh, Goran Dragic would be the second best. So I guess Napier's third. And I think that Shabazz has a chance to be a pretty solid signing. He's a good backup point guard. He's a solid defender, and he's really good in the lane, good finisher. And for that reason, I think that he's being undervalued a little bit, especially because he's a poor shooter. People are overlooking him because obviously shooting is very valuable, but for a guy that can run the offense, be a solid playmaker, is good on defense, and can finish the ball well in the paint, that's not a bad option for your backup point guard, and for that reason, I think that I would be interested in signing Shabazz Napier for something close to the mid-level, maybe not the full mid-level, but I do think that he would be a solid signing for whatever team grabs him. The 6th most underrated free agent, in my opinion, is Derrick Jones Jr. The reason why he's so low on this list is because I do think that people are starting to value him correctly and think about him as a mid-level guy. And I think that that's right around where he should be. He's young and still developing, and at this point, he's already a really good player. He's super athletic, one of the most athletic players in the league. That athleticism and his great length allows him to be a solid defender. Obviously, he could gain a little weight, a little strength, and that would make him even better on the defensive end of the floor. But as is, he's already a menace on that end, especially in the zone. He's probably the best zone defender in the entire NBA. Obviously, zone is still underutilized by a lot of teams, but that's what made him so attractive to the Heat this past year. He's a great finisher, especially in transition, as he's one of the more exciting players in transition due to that sheer athleticism I talked about when it came to his defense. And perhaps the most appealing thing about Derrick Jones Jr. is that he's young and still developing. There's still room for him to grow. He can continue to get better, and I think that he could end up being a very, very solid defensive wing for a rebuilding team this upcoming year. He'd make a lot of sense on the Hawks, in my opinion, especially if they could get him for a lower number. I think they probably will be able to. And I think that he would make a lot of sense as a guy who can D up alongside Trae Young. Obviously, the big problem with Jones is his jump shot, as he's really not a very good shooter at all. But if we can see improvements from him in that category, it could make him a very, very valuable role player for a playoff team moving forward. And he probably wouldn't fall out of a playoff rotation like he did this year with the Heat. So I think that Derrick Jones Jr., despite not having a great playoff run where he got benched for a large portion of it, still has a lot of value and would be a guy I would be looking for something close to the mid-level. The next guy on this list, the 5th most underrated free agent of the 2020 free agency class, is Trey Burke, who is a point guard, played for the Philadelphia 76ers during the regular season and later the Dallas Mavericks for the bubble and the playoffs. And we saw Trey Burke be a pretty big difference maker for the Mavs. He was a secondary shot maker for them outside of Luka Doncic. He was one of their most intimidating options. He's a really good shot creator, a solid passer, takes care of the ball, doesn't really turn it over too much. I think he only averaged like 1.7 turnovers per 36 minutes, and obviously that might have been because of the role player, that position that he was playing, but I still do think that he Has a lot of value as a guy off your bench who can be a spark plug, scores the ball really well, really well. This past year, we saw him take a huge jump in shooting as he shot into the mid 40% three-point percentage. I'm not sure that his shot is quite that good, but I do think that he is a solid shooter and can provide some valuable spacing off the bench for a good team. He also is a pretty good defender for someone as small as he is. He works hard on that end, and he's strong enough that if he gets in the post against a bigger guy, it's not completely over, although obviously he's only like 6'2", so he's not going to be a stopper or anything, but for a guy that small, he does a pretty good job. And so for all those reasons, I think that he could be a very good signing for a team like the Utah Jazz, where he can come off the bench and provide some scoring for them, especially if they lose Jordan Clarkson in this upcoming offseason. He could really step into Clarkson's role as a scorer off the bench, and he could also probably come at a cheaper price tag than Clarkson would. So I think that for a team like that, he could be a very nice signing as a bench point guard who can just get you a bucket. The fourth most underrated free agent in this class is Derrick Favors. I think that Favors didn't have a great showing in the bubble alongside Zion Williamson in the Pelicans front court, and for that reason his stock has gone down quite a bit. But I still do think that he's a good either stopgap starting center or one of the better backup centers in the entire NBA, and for that reason I really think that using something close to the mid-level on him could be a solid idea. He's a great rebounder, one of the better rebounders in the game. I would put him on the same level as like Andre Drummond and Tristan Thompson there. And the area where he separates himself and makes himself, in my opinion, a more valuable player than Drummond or Thompson is that he's a really good defender. He's a good rim protector, really good at protecting the rim. He's best off in a drop coverage scheme, which seems to be being run by more and more teams recently, taking after Coach Mike Budenholzer and the Bucks and what the success they've had with Brook Lopez playing that drop scheme the past couple of years. So for a team that's utilizing the drop coverage, Derrick Favors can be a great addition. He also has some offensive game. Obviously, he's not like a go-to guy there or anything, but he has a couple solid moves in the post where he can like throw up a nice jump hook or take a nice mid-range jumper. Like, obviously, these are not high-quality shots, but he's at least capable of doing something on the offensive end when he gets a mismatch. And he's also solid in the pick and roll. He's not a super athletic rim runner. He's not Montrezl Harrell or anything, but he can finish the ball well. And he also has a decent pick and pop game, although it's more like 15-foot mid-range jumpers instead of threes, which is what you'd prefer. But I do think that Derrick Favors is a guy that's being very much undervalued, and I could really see him coming to a team to either be a starting center or one of the higher quality backups in the league. So Derrick Favors is another guy that I would like to see teams target, and I think that the Pelicans should really look to bring him back. The third guy on this list, the third most underrated of the 2020 free agency class in my opinion, is Nerlens Noel, who is one of the more switchable big men in the entire NBA due to his athleticism. He's very versatile on that end of the floor as he's a solid rim protector, and he can also switch out and guard the perimeter. He's got really good lateral quickness and can guard pretty much like 2 through 5, which is very valuable for a center. I think that a team that utilizes a switch-heavy scheme, such as the Houston Rockets or Miami Heat, could really value Noel. The only problem is that both of those teams value spacing quite a bit, and that is where Noel's big minus is. He's not a good shooter, and his offensive game as a whole is really lackluster outside of being a pretty good dunker. He's super athletic, and he's a good rim runner, can set good screens, so for that reason he has value on the offensive end, but outside of that there's not too much. However, for a team that's really pick and roll heavy and utilizes a switch-happy defensive scheme, Nerlens Noel could be a great fit. He's also pretty young still. I think he's only 25 or 26, after being an early lottery pick earlier in his career. So I think that you'll be getting the best of his career here, and he can be a solid big man who can play 20 to 24 minutes per game for you, even in a playoff situation, due to his defensive versatility and rim running offensively. The second most underrated free agent in this upcoming 2020 free agency class is pretty similar to the first guy too, so once I say the second guy, you might be able to figure out the first guy, but the second guy is Chris Dunn, who is the guy that I really like. He's one of the best defensive guards in the entire NBA, gets so many steals and can create some transition offense for himself where he's a really good finisher. That's really the extent of his offensive value, as he's a poor shooter and could really do for some improvement on that end. If he doesn't figure out his jump shot, which he probably won't based off of his career so far, it really takes away his value, but I still think that he's someone that I would give close to the mid-level for due to his ability as a stopper on the defensive end of the floor. He could be really useful for a team like Atlanta or Phoenix that likes to run in transition where he's at his best, and also is in need of some defensive wings. I think Chris Dunn could be a fantastic addition for them as a guy who can D up and be a real stopper for you. He's going to be valuable in a playoff rotation, and he's also going to be really valuable in the regular season as he can generate offense with his defensive playmaking, and he can also obviously shut down the best guard or wing on the other team. So I'd really look for teams to target him this year, and I would not be shy with paying him a solid, maybe it's like 4 years, $30 million deal. I think that he could be worth that kind of money, and I would not be afraid of signing him to that if I were a rebuilding team. Like I said, the number one guy on this list is pretty similar to Chris Dunn, but he's better than Chris Dunn, especially on the offensive floor, and it is DeAnthony Melton. I'm a big DeAnthony Melton fan. I believe that he's the best shooting guard in this upcoming restricted free agency class that has a few solid ones. Obviously, I'm not a big Malik Beasley fan, as I stated yesterday, but I am a big believer in I think it's Bogdanovic. I always mix them up, but I believe Bogdan is the one on the Kings that's a restricted free agent this upcoming year. Bogdan's a great shooter, pretty solid playmaker. Defense isn't great, which kind of makes him the opposite of DeAnthony Melton, but I think that Melton is better than either of those two guys in Malik Beasley and Bogdanovic. I think that Melton is a guy that could go for like a 4-year, $64 million deal due to his ability to be a high-energy guy who plays great defense, is one of the better rebounding guards in the entire NBA, rebounds pretty much like a forward, would be a really good rebounding forward at that. Dude, he's just very good at that. Really good on-ball defender, really smart team defender as well. Could be a secondary ball handler for a team if they needed him. And he could also be a really good player if his shooting develops. And at that $16 million annual contract, if the shooting develops for him, that's really going to be a bargain, because this guy has great defense, great rebounding, like I said before. And on offense, he's pretty solid at finishing at the rim and creating looks for his teammates. So if that shooting develops, watch out. DeAnthony Melton could be one of the better players in the NBA. No. I'm sorry. He could be one of the better role players in the NBA. And I already think that he is a solid role player. And I don't even know if I mentioned this. He's like 22 or 23. So this guy still has room to grow, and if you believe in that jump shot and you think you can develop it, this guy could be one of the bigger bargain deals, and he could be a huge piece for a rebuilding team moving forward. I think he could be a perfect option for the Hawks alongside Trae Young, similar to what people are saying that Tyrese Halliburton could be for the Hawks. So Melton, in my opinion, could be a great addition for them, and they have a lot of cap space, so I would really look to sign DeAnthony Melton and make him one of the primary pieces of your rebuild. However, the Grizzlies could match pretty high offers, and I think that they probably should, although they do have Dylan Brooks as a shooting guard for them. However, Melton is a completely different type of player from Brooks, and I think that he is very good and very young. So any team like that, Atlanta, Phoenix, and Memphis, should really be looking to either bring this guy back in Memphis's case or bring him in Atlanta or Phoenix case. That's why he is the most undervalued and underrated free agent in my opinion. Let me know in the comments section down below who I missed on this list and who you agree with on this list. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. That's it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you all again very soon.